back to the Hard Skills Show, where we take a deep dive into the most challenging soft skills required to navigate leadership uncertainty, complexities, and change today and into the future. I'm your host, Dr. Mira Brancu, psychologist, leadership consultant, and founder of TowerScope. A little while back, some of you might remember a fantastic episode I had with Dr. Sarah Porter, who shared so many great tips on how to give and receive feedback with finesse. Feedback giving is probably one of the top challenges leaders experience and request help with today. And today you're in for a real treat because we're going to take another deep dive into feedback giving, and this time focus specifically on discussing the dreaded performance feedback with employees. Providing performance feedback usually sparks frustration and fear for both the leaders and their team members, right? And we're going to talk about why from the perspective of what the research on neuroscience and psychology says, and learn a new framework based on a decade of research and application. And it's really great for season 7's focus on navigating unhealthy workplace environments, because if you struggle with performance feedback giving, it's going to feel like an unhealthy work environment for you and for them, right? So whether you're a leader managing a team, a coach, or simply trying to support your colleagues, this conversation is for you. Now, before we get started, this is yet another reminder that our workshop, Redefining and Developing Your Leadership Identity in 2025, is coming up on May 21st. Registration is due May 1st. The workshop includes a leadership assessment, several tools to help you explore how to apply your leadership style and identity to current leadership decisions and transitions and people management. And knowing yourself and your style does have a direct impact on how you can effectively give feedback and how to do it in a way that is natural to your strengths and challenges, which is going to be discussed in this workshop. And it serves as one of the most critical cornerstones for all of your leadership decisions, challenges, and successes. And we're going to make some of those connections today as well. So as a reminder, registration is due May 1st. And now let me introduce our guests today. Doctors Kenneth M. Nowack and Sandra Mashihi. They're authors of Performance Feedback Strategies. It's published by the Association for Talent Development, or ATD. Dr. Nowack is a licensed psychologist and senior research officer of Envision Learning Incorporated, a global consultancy specializing in assessments and technology platforms. He serves on the Daniel Goleman's Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations, and recently served as editor for the Consulting Psychology Journal, where I also served under him as one of the associate editors, which was fabulous. And he's also a fellow of the American Psychological Association through Division 13. You might also remember him from a previous episode we did on the power of resilience. He applies neuroscience and emotional intelligence research to many leadership issues. And today it happens to be about feedback, but if you read his work, he applies it to lots of other things as well. Now, Dr. Mashihi is an organizational psychologist and executive coach with over 20 years of experience helping leaders and teams thrive through customized leadership development solutions. As the founder of Spectra Coaching, she works with executives, emerging leaders, and organizations to unlock leadership potential, enhance team dynamics, and drive measurable change. She was previously an adjunct professor at Pepperdine Graziato Business School and the director of coaching services at Envision Learning. So welcome to the show, Ken and Sandra.
Thank you, Mira. Lovely to be here with you again, and have my colleague Sandra with me as well.
Great. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So very excited to have you. And let's start with the basics, right? Performance feedback. What's the definition of performance feedback?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mira. Thanks for having us. Performance feedback is the process by which, in this case, we're going to say a leader and an employee, because that's what we're referring to. It's the process by which a leader is giving feedback to an employee on some mutually agreed upon expectation or standard. Same thing goes with performance management systems. Performance feedback is about getting people to those goals. Now, there's a difference between performance feedback and performance management. And what we want to do is shed light on the difference between performance feedback coaching as a philosophy and in addition to what performance management systems can use. So traditional performance management systems are about compliance, annual reviews, assessments that say this employee meets expectations or exceeds expectations. It's very formal. It's very structured. It's missing the human element. And as a coach that's worked in organizations for a decade long, I see this over and over again. I see employees complain about the performance review conversations, and then I also hear about leaders complain about it. So there is a gap between both parts. And performance feedback is about, and performance feedback coaching is about getting leaders to become coaches in the performance review conversation. It's ongoing, it's forward focused, it's development focused, and the purpose is really to help employees get them to where they need to be, but through a relationship with trust, psychological safety, mutually agreed upon goals, a frequent amount of ongoing real-time feedback. That's another thing that's missing. A lot of employees don't have that real-time feedback. And it's really about getting the leader to meet the employee where they're at and based on their needs. There is no one size fits all approach to leadership, as you know, I'm sure in your experience as well. So same thing with feedback. It's about giving feedback based on so many different factors of the employee, their motivation, their interpersonal skills, their and a bunch of different other factors, their commitment, their engagement. So we look at everything and then we help leaders package feedback in such a way so that it lands for the employee and they feel comfortable to receive it and it actually enhances their performance and helps them thrive. So, for instance, what we'll say is there's a requirement for what a feedback conversation should have. It should have for the feedback recipient or the employee to feel like they understand the feedback. A lot of employees don't understand what the feedback is. They say, I still don't know where I stand. I still don't know what the feedback is. The second requirement is the employee should feel like they can accept the feedback. They need to, at the very least, see the feedback as valuable. And then the third requirement is they need to feel like the employee should have some agreement or commitment to action. So when these three are in place, you have a conversation that's moving forward and helping the employees on their development. It's about growth and development and mutual trust. And there are a lot of moving parts to performance feedback coaching. The recipient, who the leader is, how they're perceived. Are they perceived as judgmental? Then is the employee ready to receive the feedback, or are they just passively saying okay to whatever they hear? And then there is the actual message, the content, the valence, the intent. So there's a lot of moving parts. And our goal, Ken and I, we got together after years of coaching. We want to help leaders package their feedback in such a way that it actually lands and they're creating a sense of psychological safety for the employee to feel like there is a two-way connection.
Let me ask you, so everything that you shared sounds exhausting, right? And leaders who are very task oriented, very results focused are going to be drawn to performance management more. Like evaluation across a certain metrics, have you done this with sufficient efficiency, all of that stuff, right? And when they hear the way that you describe performance feedback, which is very relational, they're going to say, like, as very soft skills. So of course I have you on the show because I'm very interested in soft skills, but they're going to automatically say, oh my God, that sounds exhausting. Why would I ever want to do that? Right? Why? I mean, that requires so much additional set of skills just to get somebody to do their job. So what would you say to someone who's much more task oriented, why it's worth putting in all of the time and energy to to focus on motivation, the relationship, psychological safety, growth, development, all of that stuff?
That's a great question. And, just so you know, kind of my background, I worked for years with sales agents that were very cut to the chase and task oriented. And it's like, I don't have time for the fluff and the nonsense and all of that. Just, you say it as it is. That's what I want to hear. So I come from that world. I understand that mentality. And it does sound exhausting when you think about, oh my God, there's so much to having these conversations. The conversations don't have to be long and rigorous and this back and forth thing. It first starts with a mindset around, let me tune into my feedback recipient, that employee. What is their need? Once I know their need, then I can tailor a conversation in real time. Like, for instance, I caught you in that last meeting. Here's some feedback. A few minutes. So it's a little bit of an investment up front, but once they identify who the employee is, what their need is, it should minimize the investment in the long run, because now they have an employee that's engaged and thriving, as opposed to not giving feedback and just doing those, basic expectations, the standards based on the metrics. And then in the long run, you have an employee that's not really bought in, not really aligned, and they're not thriving. So, and we see that all the time in organizations. So it can be simple and succinct. I want to clarify that.
Yeah. Ken, what would you add to that?
I don't know if I'd add anything. I think that's a really good way of describing things. But there is a return on investment. Today, research really suggests that employees are looking for very pointed feedback, if not just career-oriented, about how to improve and sharpen their skills. So a lot of feedback's not corrective. A lot of it's developmental. And I think all of us that are listening, if we had one person in our life that we totally loved and trusted, that could give us a wild tip to be a little bit better in one particular area, I think we're all ears. We're all open to do that. So we think of performance coaching as a mindset that most leaders, when they wake up in the morning, are thinking about their role of helping to enhance day-to-day productivity, hopefully the engagement of employees, and do it in a manner that creates a culture of safety and, as Sandra mentioned, psychological well-being. So that's really
Yeah.
the end goal. It's not always corrective. It's not always negative. It doesn't have to be really complicated and complex.
Yeah. And I would say, in addition, when you focus on performance management, which is like to a certain metric that the organization has developed, or you as a leader have developed, like you want to meet a certain number of sales, for example, within a certain period of time with a certain number of clients. That metric isn't always exciting to people. Like, it's exciting to some people. Like, if you're super achievement oriented and you're like really bought into I feel excited when I meet a certain metric or supersede, that's enough for you. But as you probably have seen, if you've been in a leadership role long enough, different people are motivated by different things, and not everybody is excited about simply going for a certain number, and knowing how to motivate different kinds of people in different ways and being able to tap into that and helping them take ownership eventually does reduce the workload off of you as a leader, because then you're not pushing somebody up a hill, or struggling to figure out why they don't get it when you tell them that you have not met the metric, or why they don't care, or they're not excited as you about it, right? There's a reason. It's because you're working with humans. And like, we don't always make sense, right? We have different interests, different goals, different motivations, and some people are driven by impact. And if you can translate, how you sort of turn those metrics into how somebody, imagines them making an impact, that makes a difference for them, right? It's basically just understanding what drives behavior. And I think we're going to get a lot more into this in a moment, but we are reaching an ad break. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to get into that kind of area around real behavior change. Okay. So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guests today, Doctors Ken Nowack and Sandra Mashihi, authors of Performance Feedback Strategies. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. At that time, if you're listening, like literally right now, you can find us live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, several other locations at talkradio.nyc. And we'll be right back with our guests in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with my guest today, Dr. Nowack and Mashihi. And we're talking about performance feedback. And Sandra, you, I believe, had started listing out kind of the requirements, the ingredients for good feedback receiving, how somebody can take it in. Understanding the feedback is one. You mentioned accepting the feedback is the second, and actually agreeing with and connecting with the feedback. Are those the key ingredients for good behavior change? Are there others that we're missing?
Maybe I'll jump in. I think one of the things I'll mention, Mira, is that Sandra and I have actually an article under peer review right now with a cute title called "Wet Babies Only Are the Only Ones Who Like Change." So at the end of the day, if you think of the terminal goal of feedback is really a prayer and a hope that people will take it in and commit to some action. And we know from brain science that habit change is easy to start things, but really difficult to sustain it over time. So think of complex behaviors that as coaches and leaders we're working with every day. Most of us just don't wake up spontaneously and think, I'm going to be a better listener. I want to be more participative with my team. So when they would employ Dr. Mashihi and yourself as a coach, you're really looking at ways to find the crease with these individuals to say, what could you be doing more, less, or differently to become more effective? And we're hoping that the feedback sticks with them in the spirit of development, kind of the euphemism of feed forward. Here's a tip, here's a suggestion, here's a technique that if you could tweak what you're doing, sometimes it's stop doing, start doing, but at the end of the day, if we can help you to do that, brain science is really interesting. It really suggests that if I could ask all the listeners right now to write their autograph, sign your name, your signature with your non-dominant hand, and then practice with your dominant hand, you'd find a few things just reflectively that's hard to do, takes a lot of time, and if you're like me, the quality or the output isn't really as good as your dominant hand. But if I could peer into your brain, if I could have you do that 6 to 8 times in repetition, we'd actually be able to see some changes at a neural level. And we have a fancy word for that called neuroplasticity. But we really need to sustain deliberate practice in coaching and training. On average, for complicated skills that we're dealing with and talking about today, on average, 45 to 90 days. So the idea of deliberate practice, keeping it up, doing it over and over until it becomes automatic, is the daunting part of leaders giving feedback, disappearing from a check-in or a meeting, or if you're in a global workforce, maybe on a Zoom call or whatever you're using as a platform today, and just hoping that people take in the feedback and will practice long and hard enough until they can write their signature with their non-dominant hand until it feels pretty comfortable.
Yeah. And I would think that a lot of leaders think, well, if I just say it once, they should be able to do it, which is ridiculous because that doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to me. So why would that be the case, right? In fact, the reality is the first part is like the buy-in, right? I often say when we work on change management, if you're not bored, they're not on board. If you're not bored with your message, they're probably not hearing it enough. And it does take a lot more time than you realize, and a lot of patience. And it's not because people are not listening or not caring what you have to say. It's because it takes an awful lot to change behavior, and you hear one part and then you try that part and then you hear the other part and you try the other part. And it takes a lot to put all of that together. So I really appreciate, that piece. I also want to share here, you two wrote this awesome article, A Clear Window into Performance. And the reason I love this article is you connected two different frameworks. One is the Johari window, and I'd love for you to sort of explain that piece for people who don't know what that is. And then the other is the trait, reputation, identity lens. And it was a very unique way to think about performance coaching feedback in terms of what is known to others that is known to you, and what is unknown to you that you're working on that somebody else might see and could help you with. And if you want to take that one.
Yeah, just a comment, and Sandra, feel free to jump in as well. I think, again, when we think about feedback, it's really helping to illuminate what is termed the blind spot or the hidden spot in the Johari window. So it's really helping us to see the world through the eyes of others. And I think I've shared this with you before, Mira, and Sandra knows this, but for the last 20 plus years, my wife and I have been involved in raising service dogs for the blind. And it's a great metaphor that all of us from time to time could use a service dog to see the impact of our behavior and to know how we're perceived. And sometimes how we think we come off and come across, there's a huge gap between how others experience us. So those are the words that a lot of folks, Robert Hogan with Hogan Assessment Systems has popularized, but this idea of the unique areas that you know about yourself that maybe you haven't shared, or others don't have an opportunity to visit and see, it's your identity. It's how you see yourself. But what's written in the bathroom walls about you, or what people say behind your back, or when we close down this podcast, if you were to write me or call me and go, hey, Ken, I don't know if you were aware of this, but you did this or that, that would be a blind spot. That would be how you've experienced me. We refer to that as our reputation. So this gap is something that Sandra and I and all coaches really work towards, is narrowing that gap to really help individuals identify what they're doing well so they can help accentuate and leverage their strengths, but also illuminate the guide dog analogy of maybe what we're not doing well that we could commit to if we're sufficiently motivated to improve. So that's sort of the merger of the old Johari window, kind of a wonderful feedback model, transposed with a newer language around identity and reputation, and the area that we're at overlaps, where we all see the world through the same lens and agree that, yep, this is what I think I'm doing. I'm really a bad driver. And if you go with me anywhere, you'd probably validate that to say, Ken gets lost everywhere. We all know that. So it's an adventure.
Curious, with the newer generation, Gen Z mostly, right? Also part millennials. I think we're hearing that they really want a lot more mentorship and development, professional development support. They want people to pour into them. They want to grow, and they're drawn to organizations that offer that, and supervisors that are also willing to mentor and coach, not just supervise. And so I'm sort of curious, have you seen that trend? And if so, any information, any research on whether they actually want to know what their reputation is? They want the feedback into the blind spots, or they just want to develop it without knowing the blind spots? And Sandra, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, we definitely see this pattern. The younger generation does definitely want career enhancement. They want employability security as opposed to job security. You know, the older generation just wanted to stay at a job and climb up the ladder. And then you have the younger generation that wants that security of, if I go to another organization, I have the skill set, the competencies, the know-how to do that. And I want my leader to invest in my career and in my aspirations. So we definitely see that. And the younger generation is actually more open to the process of being coached. So we're finding that there is definitely this desire for that. They actually expect the leader to be like a coach for them. And what leaders are seeing is, well, they're too needy. They're too entitled. You know, it's, I wasn't led this way. Why do I have to do it if I'm doing just right? Why do I have to do it for them if I wasn't led this way? So
Right.
there's definitely this new generation needs more, is more self-aware, and is seeking to be coached. So yes, they are tuned into the blind spot. Ken, do you have any research around that we can actually share?
Well, I think, as you're highlighting before we go on a break, we're seeing a change in technology. We're tethered 24/7 to our tablets, our wrists, everything that's in our pocket, that blurs the boundaries of, am I at work? Am I away from work? And the psychological contract, I think, as you're hinting at, has really changed from, as you labeled it, job security to employability security. Everybody's insecure and a free agent. So these are some of the drivers we're seeing that makes millennials and some of the younger workers today more fastidious to want feedback that helps them grow and develop.
Yeah. And that alone makes the case that if you want to retain great people, you're going to have to become a performance feedback coach. You're going to have to know this stuff, right? So great timing. We're reaching an ad break. When we come back, we'll get into your 4-stage model for how to apply these skills, right? You are listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guests today, Drs. Ken Nowack and Dr. Sandra Mashihi, authors of Performance Feedback Strategies. And we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guests today, Drs. Ken Nowack and Sandra Mashihi. And we are now moving into the performance feedback coaching model. There's 4 parts to this in your book. Let's start with the first. What is the first part of, and by the way, listen to what it's called, performance feedback coaching model, right? It's a coaching model. It's not a performance management model. So what's the first step or start of this model, the first stage?
Yeah, great question. First, I'd like to share, it's a 4-quadrant model based on 2 spectrums.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 very important lenses through which we're evaluating others. One is how they play well with others, their interpersonal skills. How much can they get along with peers, other employees, their directs, or are they creating a toxic environment where they cannot get along with others? And then the other part we're looking at is their overall performance, their skills, knowledge, abilities, technical skills. So we look at those 2 aspects. Those are the lenses for which we create this 4-quadrant model based on 2 different spectrums. So we have the high, which is high interpersonal skills and high overall performance skills. And those are the high potentials, or we like to call them the star players. And these are individuals that are getting along with others. They're engaged, they're performing well. And we highlight on this group, and we have a lot of information in the book about strategies with this group. A lot of leaders forget about this group, or they assume because they're performing fine, then they don't need to attend to them. So that's an assumption that they make, and it's a fallacy. Because those are the people that they want to keep, especially with this newer generation that's always looking to go somewhere else. So they want to keep those, their goal should be to keep those individuals engaged and thriving. So we call the approach we use with that group is called performance acceleration. We're accelerating their performance even better than how it's been. So we'll look at their career drivers. What do they want to be? Do they want to be a leader, a specialist? Do they want to be an entrepreneur? We help them dissect all of that. We help them identify their signature strengths. And then the feedback conversations look something like, I don't know if you've heard of stay interviews, but basically, what is it going to get you to stay in the organization the next 5 years? What makes you thrive? What drains your energy? So leaders have to have these kinds of conversations with high potentials to really get them to the next level. So that quadrant is really about leveraging signature strengths and enhancing their engagement and performance.
And what I love about this is that you highlighted that it's the high performance, high interpersonal that are the high potentials. Often, I think many organizations still make the mistake that if you're a high performing person, you're a high potential person. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great. So that leads me into the next quadrant, which is
Perfect.
the high performance, but the low interpersonal. So we like to call these people the toxic performers, or other authors of the Harvard Business Review magazines called them competent jerks. And basically that they're people that do great. They perform really, really well, but they can't get along with others. Either they're too abrupt, too direct, a jerk, have no empathy, not concerned for others, dismiss others. So there's a whole range of these individuals, starting from people that just don't understand that they have that impact to people that are just literally clinically narcissistic. So there is a whole spectrum of these individuals that a good leader will tune in and see, okay, how much is this person likely to change? What is the magnitude of change? And the coaching approach that we would use with these individuals is called performance management. And basically what we're doing is helping them see the impact of their behaviors. And we're helping them identify their blind spots. So some leaders are open to change and they want to know, even though it's hard to change, they at least want to know. Some don't even want to hear it. I work with a lot of these kinds of toxic performers, and you sit with them in a 360 review and they don't even want to hear about the impact. They justify their behaviors. They don't want to know who said what. They have no interest in changing. So that is actually an issue with a lot of organizations because they keep them because they're performing and they're adding a lot of revenue, but at the same time they're creating a toxic environment, which obviously leads to this contagion of effect, and you have other employees and peers that can't get along with this individual. So in the long run, it's actually going to decrease revenue. So there's this fallacy of organizations thinking they're investing in these, like you said, high potentials. I'm not sure if they're high potentials if they can't get along with others.
That's right. And I wonder if you can speak to how leaders know when to cut their losses, because a lot of times you've got folks who are like, but we're giving them a chance and they're such great performers. Like, we want to give them some time to learn how to X, Y, and Z. And you started speaking about this, like some of this is assessing coachability. Are they willing to learn, adjust, grow? Are they interested? So what are the signs that it's time to cut your losses, and how long do you give it?
Yeah, great. Well, a lot of these individuals might go through a 360 program. They might go through a coaching program. Are they engaging in some level or commitment of wanting to change? That's what I would say. And then, if we take them through a 360 process, I think they should be reassessed. Now, what's the impact? Has change been made? Are people perceiving them differently? People might see them as very direct, cut to the chase. They have that style, but there's been some relationship built where they actually have shown that they are showing some empathy. Okay, so we'll keep those, right? They just have this kind of direct style and people have an understanding of them. It's those individuals that don't care to change, don't want to change, and they keep justifying their behaviors where it's like, they've been through coaching. Now what's next?
Yeah. And it can become a weed that eventually grows across your garden and kills all of your other beautiful flowers, right? So it is important for leaders to track where their toxic performers are. And I often, one of the first questions I ask myself when people contact me for coaching or for team development is this a team development or leadership development issue, or is it a management issue? And I ask a lot of questions to ask about coachability. How well do they receive feedback? What do they do with the feedback after you give them the feedback? What happens after the feedback? And based on that, it gives me a sense, like, are they really ready, for coaching or leadership development or anything? Or are they have no interest? They're just pretending, or they feel like I'm good enough that I'm just going to be kept, So that's a really good question. Let's look at the other quadrants, which in some cases could be equally challenging. Lower performance in either way. We'd love to hear more about those.
Yeah, so now we go into the quadrant of the individuals that have lower performance, but they have great interpersonal skills, highly engaged, get along with others, good team players. They're eager and hungry to learn. And we call them the lovable learners. They just have some kind of performance issues. So the coaching approach we use with these individuals is called performance enhancement, and it's really about troubleshooting. What's your approach with troubleshooting the knowledge, skills, or deficits that they need to work on? So we help them ask questions about, have they been previously trained on it? Is it something that they can learn? Is it something that they're motivated to learn? So we help them go through a troubleshooting process. And really, it's about helping them target specific areas that they could be coached on. Usually with these individuals, it's within a few months they learn it and they're okay. It's because what's more important is that they're eager and they're hungry to want to learn. And that outweighs the performance issue if it's something that's within their realm of ability to work on. So it could also be something related to interpersonal skills like executive presence or presentation skills, or some kind of communication skill. But at least they're not individuals that are missing the interpersonal aspect of creating a toxic environment.
I wonder, this is the same question I asked, for the last one, but for a different reason.
Mhm.
How do you know when to cut your losses
Mhm.
with someone that is eager to learn, takes feedback well, but doesn't seem to be able to turn your feedback or training into consistent behavioral change or outcomes?
Yeah, they're likely, because they're eager, they're more likely to want to change. So it's like if they're hungry to learn, they're probably going to receive the feedback and probably going to commit to it. But if we see they're not committing to it, or maybe this is not a good fit, maybe that job role is not a good fit for this individual. So a company would be doing them a favor if they have that conversation where they say, it looks like this is not a good fit for you. Maybe we have another role for you, or maybe, we could send you off, somewhere else, and let's see how we're going to get you there. But usually they're more open to change, and they're likelier to change than the competent jerks.
But I think what you're hinting at too is what we call a skills set point.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit hard objectively to say to what extent can this individual jump that height or reach a particular standard. But we see it when we see it. Real quick story, when I went to college, I wanted to play professional baseball. You can laugh now, but that was my end goal many years ago. Played 1 year in college, and Coach Swimley caught me and said, "You work harder than anyone. You come to practice earlier, you leave later. But we have something better for you here at the university. It's called intramurals." So it's a good illustration of I just didn't have the capability, as interested as I was, to expand my skill set. And that was when the loss really was very apparent to the organization to say, we need to bring in somebody that's got innate talent that you don't. It was a polite and kind way of really helping to cut the loss of what made a lot of sense.
Yeah. And, that does speak to how sometimes you do have to switch from coaching to enhance to coaching out of the role or position because it's not working. And that's another sort of like hard feedback
Mhm.
to give.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we have a quick minute to go before we get into our ad break, but I do want to touch on this last quadrant, low performer, low interpersonal skills. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, I mean, this quadrant are people where the leaders have to make a decision. Are they more of a liability than a benefit? And in many cases, you want to align the feedback approach to the progressive discipline process of the organization, and we do that in our coaching engagement. So they all have their own HR disciplinary process. We want to integrate it. The approach here is about the consequence of their actions. If they're not seeing the consequence, or they're not taking action on those consequences, then yes, there's feedback approaches around helping them exit.
Yeah.
And we call that performance improvement coaching. And
Yeah.
there's a Yiddish word for basically any individual that fits in that category, and the word is oi. It's just draining and challenging to deal with low performers that lack some interpersonal competence.
That's right. That's right. And in within the federal government, the government, the sort of HR avenues here are, is it performance or is it conduct? And in this case, it's kind of a little bit of both, in performance and conduct. It's very, very difficult within the federal government to address a conduct issue as compared to a performance issue. And maybe we'll get a little bit into that when we return from our ad break. So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guests today, Drs. Ken Nowack and Sandra Mashihi, authors of Performance Feedback Strategies, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the hard skills. We just finished reviewing the 2x2 model, performance by playing well, or interpersonal skills. And we were just talking about the low performer, low interpersonal skills. And I was really fascinated to hear about aligning the coaching, the leadership coaching to the HR disciplinary model. And I would love to hear more about what that could look like if you have kind of an example or a story about that.
Dan, you want to allude to that a bit?
You're on mute.
Sandra, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So we basically it's the process by which we go through, and we want to help them understand, what is the impact of their behaviors. We'll take them through the consequences of their behavior. So if you don't change by X amount of time, it will lead to this. So it's the feedback conversations are more geared around that time frame, around whether change is going to happen. And then it's actually very tangible at that point, the conversation. It's the one quadrant that's actually is change happening or not? Have they reached a certain level of change within a certain time frame? If not, then the company has to make a decision of how they're going to move forward with that. A lot of times these individuals also have HR issues related to their interpersonal skills. So there is a lot of, liability conversations that the actual organization on a legal level needs to make that kind of decision. So it's kind of a fine line. It's how they're going to make the decision from there on out. We're not there to teach people how to fire people, but it will teach leaders that in this quadrant, you want to make sure that you give them a time frame, a structured way of helping them understand if they don't change, then they're going to leave the organization with the progressive discipline processes. And then from there on, it's the organization's decisions with how they handle it, because a lot of times these individuals also have some legal issues around their conduct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes what a coach or consultant can offer as like the first step is a lot of leaders have this hope that somehow the coach or consultant has like some magic special skill or wand that they could just go in there and fix it. And in this case, they really don't. And but there is kind of a shift in mindset, even to help them understand what coachability looks like, and to help them see like everything that you've said so far sounds like they're not interested in changing, sounds like they're causing a lot of trouble, sounds like you've tried every single thing possible, and it sounds like this is a management issue, not a coaching issue. And that alone can help leaders just be like, oh, that's what I'm dealing with, And the other challenging one, going back to the toxic performers, the thing that I find most challenging is when, and you see this all the time, a high performer has been allowed for years, sometimes decades, to go on and on the way they have, getting accolades, people working around them, never giving them feedback, leaders avoiding them, working around them. And all of a sudden you hire, some new leader or some new person comes in and they're told, you need to do something about that person. And this is the first time in like a decade that they've ever gotten any bad feedback, and they're shocked and they make it about the leader. And what do you do in that situation? Like, what would be the first step if a leader is having that kind of a conversation where this person has never gotten feedback and they've been allowed to go for a really long time with that behavior?
Well, one frame around these individuals, we often see them as overestimators in our research, meaning their self ratings, like again, of identity, doesn't match their reputation. So they will pull out that card of, look at all the prizes I've won, or look at all my reviews over the last 10 years, or look at all the money I'm bringing into this healthcare facility, or the patents that I've got stacked up for this particular organization. And we do find a personality profile of these individuals that we term overestimators of being incredibly achievement oriented, which is what spurs their ability to achieve and do well. They have high self-esteem. They have very low humility, which makes feedback really challenging. They will, in fact, push back to say, well, I'm in arranged marriages. You don't really understand the folks that are reporting to me. I didn't select them. They're the problem. I'm not. And they also tend to share that they're not very emotionally unstable, meaning they're not neurotic. They give stress, but they don't often feel it. So our tack with these individuals is really different because we have to figure out a way to form an alliance with them to be a trusted advisor rather than a feedback provider. And again, if we can partner with them in a way to say, look, you are achievement oriented, you're really successful, and there's some things, if we can help you to shine even more, would you be interested to try these on, do some things a little bit differently? Long term, you'll be even more impactful. So it's a real tough dance. I think when I was younger, I would take these challenges on, didn't have a lot of successes. When I got a little bit older, I would delegate to people like Sandra, who were a little bit younger than me, and say, great learning experience, best of luck, have a happy life. And now that we're a little wiser, we just find that these are very challenging developmental coaching situations.
Yes, indeed. As we're wrapping up, the takeaway for me out of all of these wonderful gold nuggets that you've shared, especially around this 2x2, is not to overlook the quadrant with the high performer, high interpersonal skills, because they're the ones that are going to leave. They have options, and they're the ones that are going to be looking for you being able to be a great performance coach to them in order to get even better and better. I'm curious, what is the takeaway that you would like, one takeaway that you would like people to take from our conversation?
Yes, I said it a little bit earlier. Leaders need to know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to leading, especially giving feedback. In order for feedback to land and to help people thrive and to help people understand you, you really have to tailor your approach accordingly to their needs and to meet them where they are. And don't assume that because you've given feedback effectively to one employee and it's worked and they're doing well, it's going to work with another employee. So you have to be agile and you have to understand where people are at and where you can meet them so that you can give effective feedback moving forward.
Yeah. And I'd echo that. I think the intersection of personality, race, age, culture, neurodiversity adds a layer of unpacking what we share to others in a way that they can understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love this. Okay. Here's some places that you can find Sandra and Ken. we have Envisia Learning. I keep saying this wrong. Is it Envisia or Envisia?
We'll take either. Sounds great. Thank you. Envisia is typically what we call our company.
I thought envisialearning.com, and you can find all about their many, many amazing assessments and products and resources. There's also spectracoaching.com, and you can find out more about Sandra and her work helping leaders and teams thrive. And then there's performance feedback strategies. And you can go to www.td.org to find that book, as well as in other places that sell books, Amazon included, performance feedback strategies. And what did you take away, audience, from today? And more importantly, what is one small change you can implement this week based on what you learned from Ken and Sandra? Share it with us on LinkedIn and at talkradio.nyc so we can cheer you on. The Hard Skills is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, all over the place. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague or leave a review. And if you're looking for more personalized support or leadership or team coaching, you can also head to gotowerscope.com, including Spectra Coaching and Envisia Learning, right? And the stuff that I like to talk about on this show is part of my research-backed strategic leadership pathway roadmap that I use to help socially conscious organizational misfits on their leadership journeys. To learn more, you can check us out at www.gotowerscope.com. There you can also check out my books, including Millennials Guide to Workplace Politics and the workbook version. You could check out our Leadership Academy, the workshop that I mentioned, and you can find all of that and subscribe to my newsletter over there. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. Thank you. And together, we will navigate the complexities of leadership and emerge stronger on the other side. Thank you for joining me and Doctors Ken Nowack and Sandra Mashihi today on this journey. This is Dr. Mira Branco signing off. Until next time, stay steady, stay present, and keep building those hard skills muscles. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.